So some years back, we arrived on this little tiny island in the middle of the Scottish Hebrides, Inch Kenneth, which has been in my husband's family for some time. And we got on our usual Zodiac and boated across. And towards the beach on Inch Kenneth, there was this two masses, one very big mass and one smaller mass. And the big mass was whale-sized because it was a whale. A mother whale and her calf had been thrown up in a storm during the winter, and now it was summer, so these things had been there for months. It was obvious what had to be done. We had to drag it out and get it onto the reef so that it would, naturally turn into its elemental forms. So we floated it onto the reef, and amazingly, there's all this froth and foam, and seabirds diving in and crabs doing their thing, and all the bones were picked clean and white and beautiful. I remember coming up and seeing this wonderful pile of bones, and I went over and started faffing about with it and just organizing the bones. It was an incredibly satisfying thing to do. I'm not quite sure why, but that's where I first met whale bones up close and personal. That was the beginning of things. It was given to me in a dream. The shapes of these things, they're so compelling, they're so beautiful, they're so hydrodynamic and expediency and evolution, and they're just... I started thinking about them a lot, and thinking about what if you made what is opaque transparent. There is a sort of a spiritual aspect to it. I always felt this, that you'd get to a deeper truth. When we are transparent people, we're really honest, only good comes out of that, right? The truth sets you free. I wanted to find a deeper truth in the bones. And if you make a bone transparent, all kinds of geometrical relationships that are not immediately available in the opaque bone become available to you. You can see where the front of the bone relates to a plane in the back of the bone. You can see where the angles intersect. You can see all this internal geometry that you cannot see when the bone is opaque. And I was inspired by the colors up here. I love the colors in the Hebrides, the blues, the greens, the color of kelp. And so I started sculpting the bones, and then the bones became glass. I wanted to cast them into lead crystal, into something semi-precious that would elevate them, that would make people say, oh, look at that shape. How beautiful it is, how complex, how interesting. So I cast them into the colors of the Hebrides, and I was whale dreams, and I did lots of bones. I've done over 100. They're very realistic, my bones, my glass bones. The problem is that people say, oh, you just cast a bone into, anybody can cast a bone into something, plastic, whatever. But I didn't, I sculpted them. I painstakingly sculpted each bone that I've ever cast. And I've got radius ulna and a humerus here, which are the component parts of the inner fin. Sculptors do a lot of drawing because it's a way of learning an object in a slightly different manner. It's really interesting. You look at drawings by sculptors and they all look like they've been carved on the paper. They're really interested in values. They're not so interested in color usually. We're into mass, we're into light and shadow and substance and what that implies. I had been working on work called Body as Soul, in which I looked at human anatomy, human interiors. And so, interestingly, whales are mammalian like us, and the skeletons are related. Notably, they've got very beautiful and elegant hand bones, we would call them, in their pectoral flipper fins, which you know, definitely played into the development of the idea of the fin sculpture later on. In the making of the fin, the challenge was to take a smaller piece, mech hat, and blow it up to much bigger than its original size. So it was originally about 16 inches high, and now we're going to be making it about 2 meters high. So we basically had to think in terms of scale. We've been working on so many different materials over the past months, all of which has come up not working. Every test we've done so far on plaster and wire, on acrylic clay and wire, on various different things in wire, the armature was lacking. Too much flex, too brittle, this happening, that happening. And we had this idea from one of my former projects that maybe 1/4-inch aluminum sheeting would work for an armature for the inner bones assembly of this project.
So it's ductile, which means that, you know, should it get bent, it's going to bend rather than break, and that's what we want.
Excellent.
But I don't think anywhere in the casting process we're going to reach conditions which are going to cause any distortion of it, because the temperatures are too low.
So this is very exciting that we've got the right material. Now tell me more about how we're going to make the shape, because that sounds really exciting.
So what we've done is we've taken the drawing that you've supplied,
Yes.
we've scanned that in and turned it into a digital version.
Right.
And then we're going to use what's called a plasma cutter, and that will will basically turn the aluminium that we don't want around the shape into the fourth state effectively. So we have solid, liquid, gas, and then plasma. So we'll literally obliterate the aluminium we don't want and hopefully leave behind the shape we do want.
So plasma cutting is an arc of electricity that's generated by a plasma unit, and on this machine we've got an XY control unit, and it will generate a curve around a profile that we put into the machine through the software, and that will allow us to plasma cut out a profile out of either aluminium, like this is for example.
I really wanted it to be a sculptural, sort of an internal bone, similar to the actual bones, but I was so blown away by the beauty of what you did with plasma for what was supposed to be just an armature that I was then going to put, you know, a plaster onto to make it look like bones inside the sculpture, that I sent up these 2 fingers you gave me. I sent these up to the foundry, and you can see the results. So this is our beautiful plasma cut aluminium, just naked in the acrylic, and this was my cladding, which is, you know, plaster, to make it look like bone in there. And we pivoted the entire project based on the quality, the artistic qualities of the plasma cut aluminium. Mark, the welding on this project is astonishingly beautiful. In particular, the welds have the exact feel of organic cartilaginous material in between the joints of the phalanges of the whale bones.
Now normally when you do a weld on aluminium, it's to do with strength, and it's also got to look good. Any good welder is like an artist. They produce a weld to do the job, but it's also got to look good. This area here,
Yes.
I'm rather proud of.
Yes.
That was done to show the cartilage in this area
Exactly.
here.
And the direction of the cartilaginous material, the stress is on it. It's perfect.
With the amperage, there's a foot pedal that's used.
Yes.
So the more pressure on the foot pedal, the higher the amperage. So I would, towards the end of the weld, I would come off the foot pedal to stop the crater cracks, or just put a little bit of filler rod in at the very end, just to smooth it around.
Amazing.
I mean, I think the thing that is interesting about this project is it's something a little bit different, but it allows us to utilize the sort of facilities and skills that we have here and produce an interesting artwork, an interesting piece. And so it's a nice combination, a nice synergy of things like, you know, materials engineering, technology to produce the parts, but also the art side of things as well. It's a nice combination of all these things together that you don't always see in projects.
The next challenge was what to make the outer shape of the fin out of. Now, normally monumental sculptor would go with clay, but I've got to get this shape that's, you know, over 6 feet tall up to a foundry in Scotland, and transport is an issue. And so I started experimenting with different materials such as polystyrene, paper, paper clay, all sorts of different things. And there were flaws with all of them. They were either not easily carved or modeled. And then I sort of happened on Oasis floral foam, which I had carved for another project many years ago in a workshop. And I thought, oh, that's wonderful because it's very carvable, it's very lightweight, you can seal it off. This is a shape that's basically going to be mold made up at the foundry. So they're going to make a mold, and then they're going to pour in liquid acrylic, and they're going to encapsulate the hand bones, if you will, the pectoral flipper bones of the whale.
So this is the mould for the fin. This is it's a two-part mould. So this is the underside, the mould which is sitting on this structure, and then the guys are going to fill it up to just about halfway with the acrylic mix. At which point we'll be putting the fin bones inside. What's really interesting about this project is that Colleen's decided to use our recycled material, which we've branded Remade.
We've started talking about recycling some time ago because we've had these bins of waste. Although they go for recycling, they still leave a footprint, a considerable footprint, because they're then moved around the world for processing and final product. But so anyway, we thought it would be great if we could recycle some of our own waste and put it back into production. And not only would we be saving that reproduction of waste, we'd be saving the footprint of moving it around the world in some cases.
And at the moment I'm just filtering this, I'm filtering it largely because of the size of the sculpture, and I really don't want to have too much dust in there because that'll make it hazier. So we're looking at about here.
I think maybe just slightly more towards the fat end. Yes. I think it's perfect. I'm so pleased I can be around for this. This is really great.
Once everything's set, we're going to lift the second half of the mould on top. And we're going to position it and we'll clamp it down to make sure there's no seepage, and then we'll fill up the second half of the mould through the spout at the end. Once it's poured, the frame's off the top, we'll be putting it in the big autoclave.
not only is this one of the most spectacularly beautiful and unspoiled parts of the world, massive flow country, bird life, the seals, the whales, but it's also a place you need to travel to. It's like a pilgrimage to come here, a bit like going to Iona. You make a physical journey, and coming here that's part of it, the pilgrim trail, if you like. There's a wonderful trail, a path for people to walk on here, and an ancient track over the horizon here, which would have been the road, the original path, all the way to John O'Groats round the cliff. So these ancient pathways, but we're at a watery pathway here. When I was writing the BBC Beowulf drama many years ago, having to read the Anglo-Saxon and everything, I loved the fact they referred to the sea in the Old English as the Whale Road, and we're kind of on the edge of that mystery. What's interesting about the Freswick Castle situation is it's beside the sea. I mean, literally 2 weeks ago we saw lots of orcas in Freswick Bay. From the garden, you can see them in the distance.
Dashing up the slates right now.
Yeah, I think Mark's going to take the rest of them down for you. He's going to take them all down for you now.
Oh, that's great.
Well, this should be going. This should be going somewhere.
This is basically overlooking the North Sea, and this is one of the whales, and he's heading right for the castle. And one of their communication patterns is to raise a fin and then bring it down, slap it, and that lets other whales know what's going on. I just really am pleased with the base. Now, if we can just get the two things together.
I actually contacted Colleen just the day the fin arrived on site, because for the first time, and I've been here a long time, and I'd never heard of whales in the loch, and we had a sperm whale or two sperm whales come up the loch and swim around the loch and go back down over the period of the weekend that it arrived, and I thought that was spooky enough. But then actually this weekend, whilst the fin was casting, for the first time in my life, I've been on a boat and been surrounded by a pod of dolphins. And there's some weird symmetry there that I think is just kind of strange, and I'm relating it to the fin.
I'm just very conscious today of all the millions of threads that had to come together to make this a reality today. I mean, there are obvious ones, like the fact that Craig Cameron of Midton is an artist and he understands that. So I'm just thinking about all the things that came together, Logan Henderson and the construction people and the engineering people that have signed off on the safety of this continuing to stay upright. But it's messy and it's been difficult.
Yeah,
there's been challenges.
Yeah,
and one blew up.
Yes,
and the Ukraine war stopped the parts coming for the new autoclave. And that, you know, there was war, there was plague, there was COVID. You know.
I know.